Welcome to WealthRise Stories, where clarity meets knowledge, and knowledge becomes financial power.
Welcome to WealthRise Stories. Have you ever wondered how an ordinary accounting clerk, someone with no privileged background, no special starting point, could end up becoming the richest man in modern history? I'm not talking about your typical millionaire or even a standard billionaire. I'm talking about a man whose wealth, when adjusted for inflation and measured as a share of America's GDP, dwarfs that of today's Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, or Bill Gates, making him one of the richest individuals of all time. The name I'm talking about is John D. Rockefeller. And just hearing that name alone usually brings up two very different images in our minds, two sides of the same coin. On one side is the ruthless, hard-edged capitalist, the relentless monopolist who built a massive empire through razor-sharp business tactics that eventually landed him in the crosshairs of the U.S. government. The man branded as a robber baron, feared and despised by the American public. But on the other side of that coin stands one of the greatest philanthropists in history, a man who gave away the modern equivalent of billions to create universities, medical research institutes, and educational foundations that still benefit us today. A man of deep faith who lived simply and believed that God gave me my money. So, what's the truth? Who was the actual man behind the legends, behind both the praise and the accusations? What kind of mindset shaped one of the most controversial yet influential figures in American history, and more broadly, in the entire modern world? The answer isn't found in biographies written by others, filtered through personal opinions or historical bias. The answer is found in his own words, in his memoir, Random Reminiscences of Men and Events. This isn't an outsider's analysis. This is Rockefeller's voice, his reflections, his experiences, and the lessons he chose to share with the world at age 70, long after stepping away from the peak of his power. There's one quote from Rockefeller that to me encapsulates almost his entire business philosophy and extraordinary vision. I would rather earn 1% off of 100 people's efforts than 100% of my own. What do you hear in that sentence? It's not just about money or personal ambition. It's about leverage. It's about systems. It's about the ability to see beyond yourself, about building something far larger than what any one person could accomplish alone. It is the whisper of an empire builder's mindset, a mindset that transformed a messy, unpredictable commodity into the backbone of an industrial civilization. Cut to a young, lanky John D. Rockefeller, thick glasses hunched over a desk, piled with ledgers in a small produce trading office. Then transition to dynamic footage of Standard Oil's giant refineries, chimneys, roaring tankers heading out to sea, and a world map with Standard Oil branches spreading across continents like the tentacles of a massive octopus. Just picture it. A young man from a struggling family forced to shoulder responsibility early in life with a single passion, the precision of numbers and the logic of accounting. Who could have imagined that this very man, through persistence, an unconventional vision, and an extraordinary gift for organization, would become the architect of Standard Oil, a petroleum empire so dominant that at its peak it controlled nearly 90% of America's oil industry and held global influence. From the first chaotic oil barrels pulled out of Pennsylvania, Rockefeller saw something more. He didn't just see oil. He saw energy. He saw the potential to make it cheaper, cleaner, and accessible to every household and every industry. He faced brutal business battles, cutthroat competitors, financial crises, and intense public outrage. But he relentlessly built pipelines, constructed the most efficient refineries on Earth, and created a distribution network unlike anything the world had ever seen. It was an extraordinary journey, a near-epic tale of vision, determination, and flawless execution. But don't get me wrong. This book and this series of videos is not a get-rich-quick guide, nor is it a hit piece condemning the brutality of capitalism. If you're looking for simple tricks to make fast money, this might not satisfy you. Instead, this is a direct doorway into the mind of a business genius. This is the story of a mindset. A mindset that took a seemingly simple idea, optimizing a raw resource, and turned it into a business model that reshaped the world, fueled the industrial age, and lit up millions of homes. We will not only revisit what he did, but more importantly, we'll try to understand how he thought. We'll explore how he approached competition cooperation, or absorption efficiency, innovation, risk management, team building. And most importantly, how he crafted a legacy built to last. The principles he used to build Standard Oil, from maximizing efficiency to controlling the supply chain, to laying the groundwork for large-scale philanthropy, remain profoundly relevant today. They apply everywhere from disruptive tech startups to global corporations. How do you stay clear-sighted when everything around you is chaos? How do you make decisions under crushing pressure? How do you turn failures into valuable lessons? For me, the most fascinating thing about Rockefeller isn't his massive fortune. It's the way he thought, the way he handled adversity, and the way he built something so monumental from absolutely nothing. How does someone maintain vision, calm, and an almost superhuman work ethic through the most turbulent times? How did he balance relentless business ambition with personal values and deep religious faith? Whether you love Rockefeller or despise him, you simply cannot deny his enormous impact. He was a pioneer, a master strategist, an organizational genius, and a man with an exceptionally far-reaching vision. In this video series, we won't just recount what he did. We will strive to understand how he thought. Join me as we turn the pages of random reminiscences of men and events, and uncover the secrets behind the man who helped shape the 20th century, and see how those lessons might illuminate our own path in the 21st. Let's dive into this story. Don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss a single episode. Let's get started. If someone asked you who is John D. Rockefeller, I'm pretty sure most of us would picture the same familiar image, the old oil tycoon, the ruthless capitalist, the symbol of unlimited wealth and endless controversy. Right. That's the version of him that history and even pop culture tends to carve into our minds. But today, we're not here to talk about only that. Or at least, not just that. We're here to brush off a layer of dust, set aside preconceived notions, and take a closer look at a book that I believe very few people have actually taken the time to sit with and truly absorb. Random Reminiscences of Men and Events, a collection of reflections written by none other than John D. Rockefeller himself. Even the title already feels different, doesn't it? Random Reminiscences, Not My Glorious Life Story. This is not a self-congratulatory autobiography about extraordinary achievements. It's not a triumphant speech about power or wealth. Instead, it's a series of candid reflections, small stories, and distilled lessons he gathered over a remarkable lifetime, from his humble beginnings all the way to becoming the richest man in modern American history. For me, when I first held this book in my hands, I wasn't looking for excuses or justifications for Rockefeller's actions. I wasn't even looking for secret money-making formulas I could apply right away. What I wanted, what I was genuinely curious about, was the mindset of a man who helped shape a massive portion of the American economy and society, and by extension, the modern world. How did he view success, failure, personal responsibility, social responsibility, and even the harsh criticism aimed directly at him? Our role here throughout this video series is not to judge, not to praise, not to condemn. Our role is to explore. Like archaeologists, we'll dig through layers of time, language, and storytelling to uncover hidden gems, timeless lessons, and enduring philosophies buried beneath the noise, scandals, and debates that have surrounded the name John D. Rockefeller for decades. This is going to be a journey to humanize him, to help us see the person John D. Rockefeller, a son, a father, a husband, a businessman, a philanthropist, a human being with dreams, flaws, principles, and fears. I believe that only when we set aside the massive armor of wealth and power surrounding his public image can we truly understand what he was trying to say. And more importantly, we may even discover pieces of ourselves, our own reflections, within his stories. On this journey, we'll walk through 10 central themes, each one serving as a window into Rockefeller's worldview and lived experience. The book itself isn't divided into 10 chapters, like a standard textbook, but I've organized it this way, so we can follow along more clearly. Together we'll explore 1 point, humble beginnings, his early years, and the first lessons he learned about money and work. 2. Stepping into business, the struggles, the challenges, and how he recognized opportunity. 3. The power of organization and efficiency, how he built an empire from the ground up. 4. Competition and cooperation, the business philosophy behind Standard Oil. 5. The art of managing people, how he selected, trusted, and empowered his partners. 6. The responsibility of the wealthy, his perspective on philanthropy and the distribution of wealth. 7. Health and aging, his lessons on balance and facing time. 8. Criticism and the media, how he handled public opinion and social pressure. 9. Timeless principles, the core values he held onto throughout his life. 10. Legacy and the future, what he hoped to leave behind and the messages he wanted to pass on to later generations. Each theme is a piece of the puzzle, and when all the pieces come together, I hope we'll get a clearer, richer, and more nuanced portrait of one of the most influential and controversial figures in history. Are you ready? Then let's turn the first pages and step into the world of John D. Rockefeller, not as critics, but as curious students eager to learn and explore. Now we're about to dive deep into the life of one of the most influential figures in business history, the man who helped shape modern industry itself, John D. Rockefeller. We're not starting with his massive oil empire. Instead, we're going all the way back to the early steps, the foundation stones that built an extraordinary man. This is chapter 1 of our journey, titled Humble Beginnings. Have you ever wondered how a giant like Rockefeller actually started? Were people like him born wealthy? Were they natural-born geniuses? Or was there some miracle that carried them to the top? Rockefeller's story shows us that great men don't simply appear out of nowhere. They are shaped by values, by lessons, and by experiences that begin when they're very young. 1. The first steps of a young entrepreneur. Turkeys and 7% interest. Let's rewind to a small farm in upstate New York in the 1840s. There we find a boy named John, only 7 years old, already showing an unusual business instinct. While other kids were outside playing, young John had his own project raising turkeys. He cared for them, meticulously feeding them, tracking their growth, tending to every detail. When they were grown, he took them to market himself. And here's the impressive part, he earned $50 from the effort, a huge amount for that era. Back then, $50 could buy a small plot of land or support a family for months. But the real surprise was what he did with the money. He didn't spend it on candy toys or anything frivolous. Instead, young John D. Rockefeller loaned the entire sum to a neighboring farmer at 7% interest. You heard that right. A 7-year-old was already practicing the principle of compound interest. This wasn't just a clever move. It revealed a financial mindset, a sense of discipline and an understanding of how money could grow, yet that appeared long before adulthood. It gave him his first lesson in how money makes more money, in the importance of financial management, and in the power of steady effort. From the very beginning, Rockefeller recognized the strength of numbers, not just for counting, but for creating value. 2. Lessons from his mother. Willful waste makes woeful want. Behind that sharp financial instinct stood a remarkable woman, his mother, Eliza Davison Rockefeller. She was strict, practical, deeply religious, and she shaped much of John's character. She didn't just teach him faith, she taught him a core value we often overlook today: thrift. She often said willful waste makes woeful want. This wasn't just a polite reminder, it was a guiding philosophy that became etched into John's mind from a very young age. It wasn't blind stinginess. It was about respecting every dollar, every resource. She taught him how to reuse everything, patching torn clothes, never leaving food on the table, even using lamp oil sparingly. To her, wastefulness was an insult to the blessings God had given. The lesson was not merely about money. It was about respecting resources, practicing gratitude, and accepting responsibility. In today's consumer-driven world, where throw it away and buy a new one has become a lifestyle, this lesson might be more relevant than ever. It reminds us of sustainability, mindful living, and the value of not wasting what we have. 3. His first job at 16 in the legendary Ledger A. At age 16, a major turning point arrived. After finishing a short commercial course, John D. Rockefeller landed his very first job on September 26, 1855, a day he would later call the most important day of his life. He became a clerk and bookkeeper at Hewitt & Tuttle, a wholesale produce and commission firm in Cleveland. This job wasn't just employment, it was a school. Rockefeller threw himself into the work with remarkable enthusiasm and precision. He recorded every transaction carefully, every penny, every tiny detail. The notebook he used to track every payment and receipt, he called it Ledger A. Ledger A wasn't just a stack of pages. It was a symbol of discipline, accuracy, and the importance of tracking everything. He spent hours ensuring every number matched, every entry was written properly. He didn't just learn the bookkeeping, he learned to read the numbers. They told him stories about business, health, cash flow, opportunity, and risk. This meticulous attention gave him deep insight into how a company functioned, from routine transactions to large deals. Ledger A taught him control analysis and decision-making based on data rather than emotion. It became the foundation for his exceptional financial management and his strategic vision later in life. 4. Moral foundations and religious faith that shaped his work. Alongside financial lessons and thriftiness, faith and morality were threads woven throughout Rockefeller's life. His mother was a devout Baptist, and she instilled in him values like hard work, integrity, and responsibility. To Rockefeller, business wasn't just about making money. It was a form of stewardship, managing the resources God entrusted to him. He believed wealth came with heavy responsibility and should be used wisely and ethically. Even as a boy, he learned the importance of tithing, giving 10% of his income to the church or charity. He continued this practice throughout his life. This moral foundation helped him build trust with partners and employees. It reinforced his principles of hard work, honesty, and dedication. It wasn't a performance, it was a core part of who he was. Rockefeller viewed his work as a mission and business success as both a measure of ability and a sign of divine blessing. So from the days of raising turkeys and lending money with interest to his mother's teachings on thrift to his first job, and the famous Ledger A, and finally, his deep moral and religious grounding, we can see one thing clearly: John D. Rockefeller was not born great. He was shaped by values, by lessons, and by daily discipline. Every small action, every penny earned, every line meticulously written, was a brick in the foundation of the empire he would later build. Those early years forged him into a disciplined, far-sighted man who understood the value of every dollar and every resource. These humble beginnings formed the bedrock of his extraordinary journey. In the next chapter, we'll explore how Rockefeller began building his empire from these seeds, and how he transformed basic values into monumental success. Welcome back to the channel. I'm WealthRise Stories, and I'm excited to continue our journey exploring the life and timeless lessons of one of the greatest business legends in history, John D. Rockefeller. Through his memoir, Random Reminiscences of Men and Events. In the previous chapter, we looked at his childhood and the early traits that shaped a determined, resilient Rockefeller. Today, we're stepping into Chapter 2, his first business lessons. This is where the very first seeds of a massive empire begin to sprout, and we'll break down the deals, the turning point decisions, and how his philosophy of paying attention to every detail and his obsession with tight financial control were formed. Let's turn to the next pages together. 1. Choosing to start his own business instead of staying an employee. Picture this. You're a young man with a stable job, a decent salary, and a future that seems pretty much laid out for you. That was exactly Rockefeller's situation in 1859, when he was working as a bookkeeper at Hewitt & Tuttle, a produce commission firm. A salary of $500 a year at that time was no small amount. It was enough for a comfortable life and even some savings. On one side, there was stability, safety, a path with fewer obstacles. On the other side, the uncertain sea of entrepreneurship, full of risks with no guarantees. Which path did Rockefeller choose? He chose the second one. Why? Because he wanted something bigger than stability. He wanted to control his own destiny, to make his own decisions, and most importantly, he saw opportunities that an employee would never truly own. He wanted to create value, not just receive whatever value someone else decided to pay him. This wasn't just a financial decision. It was a statement of philosophy. Rockefeller didn't want to be limited by someone else's salary cap or someone else's vision. He believed in his own abilities and his own outlook. That decision laid the foundation for the entrepreneurial spirit we still celebrate today. It required courage, self-belief, and long-term vision. And I believe that this same spirit, regardless of the era, is always the fire that lights the way for those who dare to dream big and dare to act on those dreams. 2. The importance of the books. I know where I'm going because numbers never lie. If there's one thing Rockefeller carried with him from his earliest days as a bookkeeper, it was his almost sacred respect for accounting records. He once said a line I think is unforgettable and worth writing down somewhere. I know where I'm going because numbers never lie. Sounds simple, right? Everyone knows bookkeeping is important. But to Rockefeller, it was more than just recording figures. It was an art, a science, and above all, a way of life. He didn't just track total revenue or big expenses. He tracked every cent, every tiny transaction. Every number had to be clear, accurate, and supported by detail. Why did that matter so much? Because it gave him the most honest, complete picture of his business. He never had to guess. When you know exactly how much you're spending, how much you're earning, and what your real profit is, your decisions become far more rational and precise. Accurate books were his compass, his financial map helping him steer the ship of his business in the right direction, avoid the rocks, and make the most of every favorable wind. It may sound dry, but think about your own life for a second. How many of us really track our spending in detail? We often know what we earn, but rarely know exactly where it all goes, how much is wasted, how much is invested. Rockefeller teaches us that if you want to master your finances, whether in business or in your personal life, you must first master your numbers. That attention to the smallest details in the books became the firmest foundation for strict financial control. And from that long-term sustainable success, 3. The story of borrowing from the bank and building credibility. When Rockefeller decided to start his own business with his partner, Maurice B. Clark, they needed capital. Their savings weren't enough to launch the kind of ambitious produce trading firm they had in mind. So they had to go to the bank. At the time, Rockefeller was just a 20-year-old young man, with no significant assets to offer as collateral and no long track record in business. Getting a bank to lend a large sum to someone like that was no easy task. But he did it. How? By building and maintaining his personal credibility early on. He had already shown absolute honesty, transparency in all his dealings, and, as we just discussed, extreme care and accuracy in managing money. He demonstrated to the bankers that he was responsible, trustworthy, and most importantly, that he knew his numbers inside out. He could clearly and convincingly explain his business plan, his projected cash flows, and his ability to repay the loan. Securing that first loan wasn't just about getting capital. It was a crucial milestone in building the greatest intangible asset a business person can own: reputation. That loan, small compared to what would come later, opened the door to bigger loans and stronger relationships with the financial world. It teaches us that in business, your word and your actions are worth more than gold. Honesty and keeping your promises are the foundation of every meaningful relationship, especially with financial institutions. Always remember, money can come and go, but once reputation is lost, it's incredibly hard to get back. And once you have it, it becomes one of the most powerful levers for your growth. 4. Lessons on choosing a business partner and the importance of trust. Rockefeller didn't start alone. He went into business with Maurice B. Clark, a man with more experience and some capital of his own. Choosing a partner is one of the most important decisions any aspiring entrepreneur will ever face. The right partner can double your strength. The wrong one can sink the entire ship. Rockefeller didn't choose Clark by accident. He saw in Clark qualities he deeply respected: hard work, integrity, and industry experience. More importantly, there was mutual, absolute trust between them. Rockefeller took charge of accounting, financial control, and internal management with his trademark meticulousness. Clark handled sales and outside dealings with his energy and experience. They were like two complementary pieces of a puzzle, each strong in different areas, both aligned toward the same goal. Trust here wasn't just confidence in each other's skills. It was trust and character in the other man's ethics. They knew that no matter what difficulties came up, their partner would stand with them and not betray that trust. This is a profoundly important lesson. In a business world that can be fiercely competitive and sometimes harsh, having a partner you can trust completely is an invaluable asset. It reduces stress, boosts efficiency, and creates a healthier working environment. Not just in business, but in all relationships, trust is that invisible yet powerful thread that binds people together and enables great things to happen. So be very thoughtful when choosing a partner, and once you do, pour yourself into building and protecting that trust. So what have we learned from Chapter 2? We've seen Rockefeller's courage in deciding to take control of his own destiny. We've seen his unwavering commitment to strict financial discipline, grounded in the belief that numbers never lie. We've watched how he carefully built his personal credibility, turning it into a priceless asset. And finally, we've understood how crucial it is to choose the right partner and to build a relationship rooted in absolute trust. These are just the first baby steps of a future giant. Even after more than a century, these lessons remain as relevant as ever, a true compass for anyone who wants to succeed in both career and life. In the next chapter, we'll explore how Rockefeller applied these principles in the real world as he started making bigger deals and facing tougher and tougher challenges. Stay tuned for the next breakdown in the upcoming video. If you found these insights helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future content. And let me know in the comments below which lesson from this chapter resonated with you the most. If in the previous chapters we explored the early years, the work ethic, and the moral foundations that shaped John D. Rockefeller, then today we step into one of the pivotal chapters, a historical turning point, not only for him, but for the modern economy itself. This is Chapter 3, The Birth of Standard Oil, a story about how one man saw order in chaos, efficiency, and waste, and from there built an empire that we're still studying and arguing about to this day. Let's turn back the clock and return to an era full of turmoil and opportunity. 1. The risky, wasteful black gold rush era. Picture this, it's 1859 in Titusville, Pennsylvania. Something almost miraculous happens. Edwin Drake successfully drills the first commercial oil well, and just like that, as if lightning had struck the entire region, suddenly becomes a new promised land for fortune seekers. Oil. That thick, black, foul-smelling liquid instantly turns into black gold, the fuel that would light up an industrializing world. It was a frenzy no different from the California gold rush before it, but in many ways even more chaotic and intense. Derricks sprouted up like mushrooms after rain. Everyone wanted to be the first one, the lucky one, to hit a rich vein of oil. Makeshift boomtowns rose overnight and disappeared just as quickly. Oil prices swung wildly by the day, even by the hour. What could be a fortune today might be a pile of scrap tomorrow. When I imagine that scene, it feels like a mini Wild West, where rules were loose and almost every decision was driven by hope and sheer risk-taking. Thousands of small investors swarmed into the field, each one dreaming of a life-changing strike. But what was the reality? Most of them ended up with nothing. And it wasn't just risky for the people involved, it was incredibly wasteful. Crude oil was pumped out in huge quantities, but there were no efficient systems for storage, transportation, or refining. Massive amounts of oil were dumped into rivers and streams, spilled, leaked, burned off, and caused serious environmental damage. Refineries were small, scattered and technologically backward. They undercut each other recklessly on price in a completely uncoordinated way. The entire oil industry at that time was quite literally a mess, a nightmare of inefficiency and chaos. It was a high-stakes gamble, a fertile ground for wild dreams and bitter failure. But in the middle of that extreme disorder, there was one man who looked at everything differently. 2. Rockefeller's vision. Not drilling for oil, but refining and transporting it. That man was John D. Rockefeller. What set him apart from the thousands rushing into the oil game? He wasn't hypnotized by drilling. He wasn't fascinated by the idea of striking it lucky underground. Instead, he saw a bigger picture. A deeper structural problem that needed solving: the lack of order and efficiency in refining and transportation. While others had their heads buried in the ground, chasing the next lucky well, Rockefeller looked up at the value chain. He realized that real value and long-term stability didn't lie in finding oil, but in transforming crude oil into useful products like kerosene for lighting and delivering those products to consumers in the most efficient way possible. He understood that drilling was a gamble dependent on geology and luck. But refining and transportation, those were industrial links that could be controlled, optimized, and turned into steady, sustainable profit. Rockefeller was a man of numbers and meticulous calculation. He saw waste everywhere in the small, inefficient refineries that couldn't compete on scale or technology. He saw sky-high transportation costs driven by disorganization and lack of planning. His vision wasn't about chasing luck underground. It was about building order above ground. That was where he saw order and efficiency could be imposed, creating real value for consumers and stable profits for business. Rockefeller didn't want to gamble with fate. He wanted to build a system. And to do that, he needed a strategy. 3. The strategy of consolidation and buying out competitors. So how do you turn that vision into reality in an industry drowning in chaos? Rockefeller's first big strategy was consolidation and acquisition. It sounds simple, but the way he did it was anything but. He didn't just go around buying people out aggressively. he offered something powerful: stability. With the small refineries in Cleveland where he laid the foundation of his empire, Rockefeller presented two clear options. Either you join Standard Oil. You'll get a stable supply of crude oil, better pricing thanks to scale. And most importantly, you won't have to live at the mercy of insane market swings. You'll receive shares in a strong growing company with a serious competitive edge. Or if you prefer to stand alone and fight the storm of competition and volatility, well, good luck. His message was simple and sharp. You can fight us and risk getting crushed, or you can work with us and grow together. With strong finances and skillful negotiation, Rockefeller persuaded many weaker competitors. He even offered them stock in Standard Oil, turning former rivals into partners, enemies into allies. In this way, Rockefeller gradually absorbed most of the refineries in Cleveland and later across the country. He didn't just buy facilities. He bought know-how, experience, and market share. This wasn't a bloody war in the traditional sense. It was a systematic process of consolidation aimed at eliminating waste and unnecessary duplication. Through this strategy, Rockefeller resolved a huge part of the chaos in the refining market. He turned hundreds of tiny, inefficient plants into a handful of large, powerful entities that could be managed far more efficiently. But to truly achieve the maximum level of order and efficiency he envisioned, he had to go even further. 4. Building a vertically integrated system to control every step. Simply merging refineries wasn't enough. To truly control the order and efficiency he was obsessed with, Rockefeller needed to control every step in the supply chain. From the moment oil was extracted to the moment the final product reached the customer. This is where the concept of vertical integration came fully to life, and Standard Oil became its master. Simply put, vertical integration meant that instead of focusing on just one stage, like refining, Standard Oil would own and control all the major stages of the business. Transportation. Instead of paying high fees to railroads, Standard Oil built and owned massive pipeline networks that moved crude oil from the fields to its refineries quickly and far more cheaply. This was a revolutionary move that completely changed the economics of oil transport. Supporting production, kerosene and other products needed containers. Instead of buying barrels from suppliers, Standard Oil built its own barrel factories. They even owned timberlands to secure the raw materials, rail and water transport beyond pipelines. The company invested in specialized tank cars, oil tankers, and fleets of wagons and trucks to move products into every nook and cranny of the country. Distribution and retail. Standard Oil didn't stop at wholesale. It built a network of storage facilities, distribution points, and even retail outlets. They employed sales teams to ensure products reached consumers directly while keeping control over pricing and quality. Imagine the competitive advantage this created. Standard Oil no longer depended on third parties. It controlled every major cost from raw material to finished product. It could guarantee quality across its entire line, from kerosene and lubricants to byproducts like petroleum jelly. It minimized risk from price swings in transport or supply interruptions. Every drop of oil, from the moment it came out of the ground to the moment it burned in a household lamp, passed through a system tightly controlled by Standard Oil. This was the peak of the order and efficiency Rockefeller constantly pursued, turning a wasteful, chaotic industry into a finely tuned, highly efficient machine. And so, Standard Oil wasn't just a company, it became an ecosystem, a revolutionary business model. Founded in 1870, Standard Oil quickly grew into a giant, a force that dominated nearly the entire American oil industry. With extraordinary vision and execution, Rockefeller transformed a disorganized, undisciplined industry into a system that was organized, efficient, and incredibly profitable. He didn't just make money. He reshaped how business could be done, how production and distribution could be structured in the industrial age. He brought order and efficiency to a place that had previously known only chaos and waste. Of course, the rise and expansion of Standard Oil also sparked huge controversies over monopoly power and unfair competition issues we'll dig into more deeply in later chapters. But no matter where you stand on those debates, you can't deny Rockefeller's strategic vision and system-building ability. He saw the problem and he built the solution. This teaches us an important lesson. You don't always win by chasing the hottest trend or the latest rush. Sometimes the real opportunity lies in stepping back, seeing the bigger picture, identifying the structural weaknesses of an industry or system, and then patiently building solutions that bring order and efficiency. Standard Oil is living proof that with the right vision and strategy, you can turn chaos into order, and from there, create enormous value not only for yourself, but for an entire economy. And this is still just the beginning of Rockefeller's story with Standard Oil. In the next chapter, we'll dive deeper into how he maintained and expanded his empire, as well as how society and the government reacted to the growing power of Standard Oil. If you found this video helpful and engaging, don't forget to hit like, share it, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next. Tap the notification bell to get updates as soon as a new video drops. Now, we're stepping into a part that personally, I believe, is the soul, the DNA behind the massive success John D. Rockefeller and Standard Oil built. Chapter 4, The Philosophy of Efficiency and Thrift. If in the previous chapters we talked about vision, business, boldness, and the ability to build an empire from scratch, then in this chapter we're going to dive into something that sounds simple, but is actually a key that unlocks everything: the mindset of eliminating waste at every level and turning what looks like scrap into profit. Sounds dry. Trust me, this is one of the most valuable lessons I've taken from Rockefeller, and I'm pretty sure it will be for you too. It doesn't just apply to business. It applies to life, to any goal you want to achieve. 1. The story of saving every drop of sealing oil. When meticulousness becomes culture. Let's start with a classic story, an anecdote often used to paint Rockefeller as stingy. But in reality, it's a symbol of a much deeper philosophy. On a visit to one of his refineries, Rockefeller, with the sharp eyes of an owner who always pays attention, noticed something tiny that made him stop and think. He saw workers using oil to seal the lids of barrels that held finished products. After each seal, a tiny drop of oil no bigger than a pea would drip onto the floor and be wasted. One single drop of oil. Who cares about a drop, right? Most people would shrug and ignore it. Rockefeller didn't. He immediately asked his engineers to find a way to improve the process so that little drop of oil wouldn't be wasted. You can almost imagine the reaction around him. Is this old man crazy? Saving a drop of oil? That's ridiculous. But Rockefeller knew exactly what he was doing. A single drop may be nothing. But remember, Standard Oil was producing millions of barrels every year. Multiply one drop by millions of barrels, and suddenly the number becomes huge. It wasn't just saving the sealing oil, it was saving the actual product that was being wasted. This wasn't just about material savings. It was a cultural declaration. It planted a clear message into the mind of every Standard Oil employee. No amount of waste is too small to matter. Everything has value, and we are responsible for getting the most out of it. It created a sense of responsibility and awareness of efficiency that seeped into every corner of the organization. From that tiny drop of oil, people learned that optimization and eliminating waste weren't optional. They were survival principles, inseparable from successful business. I think this lesson is still just as relevant today. In your work, in your personal life, how many drops of oil are falling every day without you noticing? Wasted time, drained energy, small, inefficient habits. If you start watching for and optimizing those drops, you'll see your life change in a very real way. 2. Reusing byproducts, turning waste into massive profit. If the barrel sealing story is about meticulous attention to tiny details, then the story of turning waste into gold is about a much broader vision about revolutionary innovation. In the early days of the oil industry, refining crude oil to produce kerosene was the main goal. Kerosene was in high demand for lighting and heating, but the refining process produced a lot of byproducts, essentially waste. People didn't know what to do with them, so they were usually dumped or burned off. That didn't just pollute the environment, it was a massive waste of resources and money. Rockefeller and his team saw opportunity where others only saw garbage. Instead of throwing it away, Standard Oil invested heavily in scientific research. They hired top chemists and engineers to figure out how to turn these waste products into something valuable, and the results were incredible. From tar for paving roads and construction materials, to lubricating oils for factories and engines, to candle wax, to Vaseline paraffin and hundreds of other petrochemical products. Imagine a refinery that doesn't just produce kerosene, but creates an entire ecosystem of products that serve everything from industry to everyday life. This didn't just lower the cost of producing kerosene because they were making money off what used to be thrown away. It also opened up completely new markets. They weren't just selling oil. They were selling everything that could be made from oil. From a single raw material, they built a massive value chain, turning what everyone else saw as worthless into enormous profit and an unbeatable competitive advantage. This is a perfect example of circular economy thinking long before that term even existed. I often ask myself in our lives, how many byproducts are we wasting? Maybe it's extra skills you never use, experiences you label as failures, or dead time in your day. If we learn to refine and recycle them, who knows what new value we might unlock. 3. Using science and technology to cut production costs. The quiet revolution. Standard Oil's efficiency philosophy didn't stop at using byproducts. It ran through every inch of the production process, powered by relentless application of science and technology. Standard Oil was never satisfied with the status quo. They constantly searched for more efficient refining methods, better ways to transport oil like large-scale pipeline systems, instead of expensive, clumsy rail shipments machines that used less energy and standardized semi-automated processes that reduced errors and boosted productivity. Rockefeller understood that investing in R&D into the brains of scientists and engineers was one of the highest return investments over the long run. Every small improvement in a process, every smart step in optimization shaved a little bit off the cost of each unit produced. And when you're producing millions of units, shaving off just a few cents per unit can translate into millions of dollars by year's end. This cost advantage allowed Standard Oil to sell its products at lower prices than competitors and still maintain high profit margins. This wasn't some burn cash to gain market share trick. It was the natural result of long-term disciplined optimization. This is a market-dominant strategy that's very hard to beat: high-quality product, best possible price. It's a long-term mindset worlds apart from the short-term quick-win mentality of many businesses then and now. To me, this underscores the importance of continuous learning and staying updated. Whatever field you're in, there are always better, more efficient ways to do what you do. Actively seeking out and applying those improvements doesn't just help you perform better, it increases your value and the value of your work. 4. The philosophy. Success comes from doing ordinary things extraordinarily well. Everything we've just talked about, from saving the tiniest drop of oil, to turning waste into products, to using science and technology to optimize every process, can be wrapped up in a philosophy that Rockefeller and Standard Oil lived out relentlessly. Success comes from doing ordinary things extraordinarily well. It sounds simple, but think about it carefully. It's not about chasing some insanely complicated or revolutionary idea at the start. It's not about waiting for a secret success formula to fall from the sky. It's about meticulousness, dedication, and persistence in improving every tiny aspect of everyday work. Rockefeller didn't invent oil or the refining process. Those things already existed. What he did extraordinarily was how he organized, operated, and improved those ordinary processes. He did everything more efficiently, more cheaply, and with higher quality than anyone else. It's like an Olympic athlete. They're not only doing the difficult drills, they're paying attention to each small movement, each breath, each meal, every hour of sleep. They take the ordinary work of training and execute it at an extraordinary level of detail and discipline. That's why they become champions. In an age where everyone is looking for hacks and shortcuts to success, Rockefeller's philosophy is a powerful reminder of the strength of consistency, of mastering the basics, and of relentlessly improving yourself. Success usually doesn't come from one big explosion, but from thousands of small actions done well day after day, compounded over time. Try applying this philosophy to your own life. Whether you're learning a new language, working out, managing your finances, or building relationships, don't underestimate the small, boring actions. Do them intentionally, carefully, and wholeheartedly. You'll be surprised by the results. So, Chapter 4, The Philosophy of Efficiency and Thrift, isn't just a dry business lesson about how Standard Oil made money. It's a powerful reminder of the impact of attention to detail, of constant improvement, of seeing value where others only see trash, and especially of the power of doing ordinary things in an extraordinary way. I hope these reflections have given you some fresh perspectives and a bit of inspiration. Try bringing this mindset into your work and your personal life. I truly believe you'll start to notice positive changes. In the next chapter, we'll explore another equally important dimension of Rockefeller, his ability to build and sustain a strong, loyal team, and how he viewed the role of people in the rise of an empire. In the previous chapter, we explored the almost unreal vision and bold moves that allowed John D. Rockefeller to build a petroleum empire from the ground up. We saw that he wasn't just a businessman, he was a master architect who reshaped an entire industry. But for a vision that massive to become reality, for an empire to grow and stay stable, one core element is absolutely essential: people and structure. And that is exactly what we'll dive into in Chapter 5, Building an Empire, People, and Structure. This is one of my favorite parts because it shows that Rockefeller wasn't just brilliant with numbers or market strategy, he was also a master in the art of managing people and creating a company culture that remains relevant even today. Let's take a deep look at how Rockefeller managed a massive organization, how he chose and worked with his people, and how he built a culture rooted in performance and loyalty. 1. Paying high salaries to attract and keep talent, a philosophy ahead of its time. From the very beginning, Rockefeller held a very clear view on talent: pay top dollar for the best people. Sounds obvious, right? But in reality, countless companies still struggle to value talent correctly or try to save costs by offering average salaries. Rockefeller was different. He understood that to bring in the brightest minds and the most skilled hands, you had to be willing to pay for them. More importantly, he didn't consider it a cost. He saw it as the highest return investment he could make. When you pay a top salary to top talent, you're not just buying their time and effort, you're buying their full focus. They're not worried about financial struggles or being tempted by offers from competitors. Their energy and intellect pour fully into your company. In Random Reminiscences, Rockefeller openly shared that he always sought the very best people and was willing to pay them the highest salaries on the market, sometimes far above what anyone else was offering. This created a virtuous cycle. Great people wanted to work at Standard Oil because of the high pay and opportunities. And once inside, they felt valued and rarely wanted to leave. To me, this is a timeless lesson that very few companies execute well even today. Paying high salaries isn't just about attracting talent. It's also a shield that keeps them with you, especially in a fiercely competitive market. 2. The art of delegation and trusting his associates. Paying high salaries wasn't enough. Once Standard Oil grew into a massive giant, there was no way one man could micromanage everything. Even someone with Rockefeller's vision and iron discipline understood his own limits. That's where his art of delegation and trust came into play. He wasn't a micromanager. His philosophy was simple. Once you hire great people, trust them. Give them authority. Let them work. Rockefeller believed that if you've already invested in top talent, your job is to create the best conditions for them to perform. He gave significant autonomy to refinery directors, regional managers, and department heads. This created two powerful effects. It freed Rockefeller himself. He could focus on macro strategy, long-term planning, and big-picture decisions instead of drowning in daily operations. It sparked ownership and initiative. When people are trusted and empowered, they feel respected. They're motivated to prove themselves, bring new ideas, and solve problems proactively. They stop being order followers and become co-owners of the mission. Imagine being a conductor of an orchestra. You might be brilliant, but if you try to control every finger movement of every musician, the whole performance falls apart. Rockefeller was the kind of conductor who could bring out the best in every musician in the Standard Oil Symphony. 3. Building a modern corporate structure and board of directors. For delegation and trust to work on such a massive scale, Rockefeller needed structure. He and his associates didn't just build a company, they pioneered a corporate management model decades ahead of its time. Back when most companies were still small partnerships or family-owned shops, Standard Oil created a modern organizational structure, a true board of directors. Not a group of friends, but a council of some of the best strategic financial and operational minds available. Specialized committees, finance, production, transportation, sales, each with experts, focused on solving specific problems and streamlining decisions. Clear hierarchy and responsibilities. Every department, every person knew their role. Yet coordination across the entire organization remained tight and efficient. This structure allowed Standard Oil to operate like a perfectly lubricated machine, even though it sprawled across states and eventually across countries. It provided a framework for decision-making, problem-solving, and long-term planning, while still remaining adaptable enough to handle market changes. This model became a blueprint for the multinational corporations we see today. Rockefeller didn't just think about products or markets, he thought about how to organize everything in the most sustainable way. 4. The story of Rockefeller's key lieutenants and how he worked with them. Behind this modern structure and management philosophy were extraordinary individuals Rockefeller trusted deeply. In random reminiscences, he spoke of them with genuine admiration. First and foremost was Henry Flagler, his right-hand man, a brilliant strategist and organizer, especially in finance and logistics. Rockefeller once called Flagler the greatest partner a man could ever have. Flagler helped systematize operations, make major financial decisions, and build the operational backbone of Standard Oil. Their partnership was more than business. It was a perfectly complementary alliance. Then there was Charles Pratt, a refining expert with deep technical knowledge who strengthened Standard Oil's production capabilities. And of course, John D. Archbold, who joined later, but quickly proved himself to be an exceptional leader and eventually succeeded Rockefeller. Archbold had a remarkable talent for handling political and public challenges, an area where Rockefeller himself wasn't always comfortable. The way Rockefeller worked with them wasn't just about assigning tasks. He collaborated with them. They held intense discussions, open debates, and most importantly, Rockefeller always listened especially to opposing views. He didn't want yes men. He wanted people who could challenge him, bring fresh perspectives, and help him make better decisions. This combination, high pay, deep trust, real empowerment, and a transparent, respectful culture, created a team that was unified, loyal, and exceptionally high-performing. They weren't just employees. They were members of a shared mission, builders of something monumental. So what do we learn from Chapter 5? Investing in people is the highest return investment. Don't hesitate to pay for talent. Trust and delegation are essential for growth. They free you and ignite your team's potential. Clear structure is the foundation of expansion. A well-designed system supports every decision and operation. Build your team with respect and real listening. Great partners need recognition and involvement, not just a paycheck. These principles haven't aged one bit. Whether you run a large company, a small startup, or even just manage a personal project, understanding and applying these ideas about people and structure is incredibly valuable. Personally, these are lessons I always try to internalize because no great team is ever built by one person alone. Rockefeller didn't just build an oil empire. He built an empire of people and management, a legacy that still influences the world today. In the next chapter, we'll explore an entirely different but equally important and controversial side of Rockefeller. His fierce competitive strategies and the criticisms he faced. Let's uncover the darker side of the empire and the essential lessons about resilience and adaptation hidden within it. In the previous chapters, we've immersed ourselves in the bold entrepreneurial journey, sharp intellect, and extraordinary vision of John D. Rockefeller, the man who turned oil from a little-known liquid into a primary energy source that completely transformed the face of the modern world. We've seen how he built a solid empire from nothing, from saving every last penny to making some of the boldest business moves in history. However, like every story about power and great wealth, the journey of Rockefeller and Standard Oil was not always lined with roses or filled only with praise. And today, we're going to dive into a far less comfortable yet incredibly important part of this story. A chapter that anyone who cares about business ethics and power needs to reflect on. Chapter 6, Facing Criticism. This is not just a look back at historical controversy. It's also a mirror reflecting the complex relationship between a giant corporation, the public, and the law issues we are still wrestling with to this very day. Standard Oil was not only famous for its spectacular success, but also for competitive tactics that the public and smaller rivals labeled ruthless, unethical, even predatory. Honestly, when I read these parts, even I had to stop and think hard about the line between fair competition and outright crushing your opponents. Picture this, a small business struggling to survive in the oil industry. Standard Oil, with its massive scale, could suddenly slash the price of kerosene in that local market to a level below the cost of production. The goal: drive that small competitor out of business. Once the rival went bankrupt or was forced to sell their company to Standard Oil for pennies on the dollar, Standard Oil would quietly raise prices again. It didn't stop there. They were also accused of secretly cutting deals with railroad companies to get special shipping rates, so-called secret rebates. That meant while small competitors had to pay sky-high freight costs, Standard Oil shipped at far lower rates. In some cases, they even received drawbacks refunds based on the freight fees that competitors paid. Sounds unbelievable, right? But that's how they built a nearly insurmountable competitive advantage. Of course, from Rockefeller's point of view and that of his associates, they called this efficiency cost optimization and natural competition. They believed that if a business wasn't strong enough or efficient enough to survive, that was just the market's way of sorting things out. A kind of economic natural selection where only the best and most efficient players remain. On one hand, you can see the logic, especially in the brutal capitalist climate of that era. On the other hand, it created massive inequality and choked off any chance for smaller players to rise. Rockefeller's view on monopoly: it is the natural growth of an efficient business. This is one of the most pivotal and controversial points in Rockefeller's thinking. In his memoir, he doesn't dodge or apologize for Standard Oil becoming a monopoly. On the contrary, he firmly believed it wasn't a bad thing at all, but rather the natural growth of an efficient business. Try looking at it from his perspective. Rockefeller saw chaos and waste in the early oil industry, hundreds of small, inefficient refineries locked in destructive competition that weakened everyone. He believed that by consolidating these refineries into a single, large-scale system of production and distribution, Standard Oil could eliminate waste, streamline operations, and lower prices for consumers. And it's true, during the years of Standard Oil's dominance, the price of kerosene dropped significantly. He argued that his monopoly actually benefited the public by providing stable supply and affordable prices. To him, monopoly was the result of superior efficiency, not some dark conspiracy. He saw himself as a builder of order out of chaos. But the public and the government saw something very different. They saw power concentrated to a dangerous degree, the ability to manipulate markets, suppress innovation, and stifle free competition. The idea that one oil king could control everything from prices to the livelihoods of millions terrified them. This was a clash between economic efficiency and political power, between corporate interests and social fairness. The antitrust lawsuit and the breakup of Standard Oil. Public anger kept rising, fueled by hard-hitting investigative journalism from muckrakers like Ida Tarbell, who exposed the darker side of Standard Oil's operations. Under growing pressure, the U.S. government could no longer sit back. Citing the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890, the government filed suit against Standard Oil. The case dragged on for years, a long, complex legal battle. Rockefeller, as usual, believed that Standard Oil had done nothing wrong. He and his lawyers fought relentlessly. But in the end, in 1911, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a landmark decision. Standard Oil was declared an illegal monopoly and ordered to be broken up into 34 independent companies. It was a thunderclap in American business history. The massive oil empire Rockefeller had spent a lifetime building was torn apart. For many, this was a triumphant victory of government and the public over corporate power. But here's the twist, and this is the part that surprises a lot of people. After the breakup, the stock of the new Standard Oil successor companies skyrocketed in value. Rockefeller, who held large stakes in these companies, actually became wealthier than ever. He didn't lose money on the breakup, he made even more. Part of the reason was that once the individual companies stood alone, the market reevaluated their true worth, especially with the legal uncertainty removed. On one level, it's a historical irony. On another, it shows Rockefeller's long-term financial foresight and the intrinsic strength of the businesses he built, even when their structure was forcibly changed. Lessons about the relationship between business, government, and the public. So what do we take away from this stormy chapter? This isn't just history, it's a pattern that repeats over and over in the modern business world. First, no business can operate completely separate from the society and moral values around it. Standard Oil may have been incredibly efficient economically, but ignoring concerns about fair competition and concentrated power cost it its social license to operate. Money and profits cannot buy public approval forever. Second, the role of government in regulating markets is crucial. While people can argue about how much intervention is too much, the Standard Oil case laid the groundwork for modern antitrust law, ensuring that no company could grow so large and powerful that it could strangle an entire market. It's a delicate, ever-shifting balance between encouraging innovation and protecting competition. Third, and maybe most important, is the power of public opinion and the media. The muck-rocking journalists of that era played a key role in shaping the narrative and pressuring the government to act. In today's age of the internet and social media, the voice of the public is stronger than ever. A negative media storm and ethical scandal, these can destroy a company's reputation and market value in a matter of days. Just look at today's tech giants like Google, Amazon, or Meta, Facebook. They're facing similar questions about monopoly power, unfair competition, and outsized influence. The history of Standard Oil is a warning shot. Great success comes with great responsibility. Ignoring the public and regulators can carry a very high price. Chapter 6. Facing criticism is not an easy chapter to read, but it's essential if we want a full picture of John D. Rockefeller and the true scale of Standard Oil. It shows us the scars of an era when capitalism was still wild and the ethical boundaries of business were constantly being tested. It reminds us that alongside creativity and vision power and wealth always come with heavy responsibilities. Interestingly, after all these storms, Rockefeller shifted into a completely different phase of his life philanthropy. He learned in his own way about responsibility and the power of legacy. In the next chapter, we'll explore how he built a legacy that went far beyond his oil empire, and how he tried, in some sense, to make amends, or at least give back to society on a massive scale. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the channel. I'm WealthRise Stories, and today we continue our journey into the heart and mind of one of the most fascinating figures in American history, John D. Rockefeller, through his memoir, Random Reminiscences of Men and Events. If in the previous chapters we saw Rockefeller as the sharp-eyed strategist, the brilliant architect behind a massive oil empire, then today we're opening a completely different door. The door of compassion, generosity, and purposeful giving. Chapter 7. The chapter we'll dive into today has a title that's both intriguing and profound. The Art of Systematic Giving. It sounds unusual, right? Giving something everyone can do. Why would it require a system, or even be considered an art? But this is where Rockefeller once again proves his extraordinary vision. He turned philanthropy, something many people see as emotional, spontaneous, or reactive, into a structured, strategic, almost scientific endeavor, no different from the disciplined way he ran Standard Oil. 1. From steel-hard capitalist to full-time philanthropist, a remarkable transformation. Picture this, a man who spent his entire life building wealth, creating an empire from the ground up, ultimately controlling what was arguably the largest personal fortune in the world at the time. The pressure of handling such enormous wealth was immense. For Rockefeller, once he reached the pinnacle of business success, one question loomed large. What is all this money for? To leave it all to his children, to live in luxury, or to create a legacy that would outlast him? Rockefeller, practical, results-oriented, and obsessed with efficiency, realized something crucial: giving impulsively or emotionally wasn't just wasteful. It often failed to create any real impact. He received hundreds, sometimes thousands of letters every day, asking for money. If he simply handed out cash to anyone who asked, it would be nothing more than a drop in the bucket. And so came one of the greatest turning points of his life. From a steel-spined capitalist, Rockefeller slowly transformed into a full-time philanthropist. This didn't mean he abandoned business. Rather, he began to treat philanthropy as his new business, one even more complex and intellectually demanding than running an oil empire. He devoted time, energy, discipline, and strategic thinking to solving social problems, not just financial ones. This marked the beginning of an entirely new philosophy of giving. 2. The philosophy of retail versus wholesale charity. Don't just give fish, build the fishing rod. This is one of Rockefeller's most important contributions to modern philanthropy. We all know the saying, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach him to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. Rockefeller took this idea and turned it into a core philosophy which he described as the difference between retail giving and wholesale giving. Retail giving. This is direct, immediate help, giving money to individuals supporting emergencies, providing food or medicine. Rockefeller didn't dismiss it. He knew it was necessary. But he also understood it only treated symptoms, not causes. It was like handing out fish without asking whether the lake was drying up or whether the person could ever learn to fish on their own. Wholesale giving. This is where Rockefeller truly excelled. He wanted to solve problems at the root, create long-term change, and impact entire communities, not just individuals. Instead of giving fish, he invested in building the fishing rod, or even developing an entire fishing industry. His wholesale giving included scientific research. For example, he founded the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research, today's Rockefeller University, supporting medical breakthroughs that would save millions, not just a handful of patients. Education. He funded universities, libraries, and scholarship programs to empower future generations with knowledge and self-reliance. Community development. He invested in sanitation infrastructure and public health things that improve life for entire populations. Rockefeller understood that lasting change comes from strengthening systems, advancing knowledge, and empowering people to help themselves. This didn't just uplift individuals, it elevated entire regions and sometimes entire nations. 3. Applying business principles to philanthropy. Research metrics, efficiency, long-term investment. This is the part I find most fascinating. To Rockefeller, giving wasn't emotional charity, it was a grand enterprise requiring the same rigor and intelligence he used to run Standard Oil. Thorough research. Before donating a single dollar, Rockefeller demanded deep study. What is the real problem? What are its root causes? Which solutions actually work? Just like he would never drill a new oil field without geological research, he refused to donate based on feelings or anecdotal stories. He wanted data analysis and expert insight, measuring impact and calculating social return. It may sound cold, but it's actually deeply compassionate. Rockefeller didn't ask, "How much did I give?" He asked, "What difference did my giving make?" He wanted to ensure every dollar produced the highest possible social return on investment. If a project failed to generate real impact, he stopped funding it and looked for better strategies, just as any good business would do. Long-term investment and building foundations. Instead of quick fixes, Rockefeller funded long-term structural solutions. His foundations were designed to operate for generations, not just one moment in time. He understood that solving deep societal issues like poverty and disease required patience, persistence, and long-range vision. Hiring experts, just like he hired the best engineers to build refineries, Rockefeller hired the best scientists, educators, and foundation managers to oversee his philanthropic work. Decisions were made by experts, not by impulse. This professionalization of charity became the model for modern philanthropy, followed later by giants like Carnegie, Ford, Gates, and Buffett. 4. The importance of quiet, purposeful giving. Another aspect of Rockefeller's giving that impressed me deeply is how quietly he did it. In his memoir, he emphasizes giving discreetly, avoiding attention or public praise, not because he wanted to hide his generosity, but because he wanted the focus to stay on the work, the mission, not on himself. Once charity becomes a performance, it risks losing its sincerity. Rockefeller wanted his contributions to be judged by their results, by the good they created, not by the applause they generated. Every dollar he gave had a clear purpose, carefully planned and aligned with a long-term vision. Behind this was a profound belief: wealth is a form of stewardship. Those who have it are responsible for using it wisely, effectively, and with integrity. To Rockefeller, giving was not an indulgence or a hobby. It was a duty, a privilege, and a disciplined craft. The art of systematic giving is more than just a chapter. It's a powerful lesson on vision, social responsibility, and how we can create meaningful, lasting impact in the world. Rockefeller didn't just transform business, he transformed philanthropy. He turned giving from an emotional impulse into a science and art form, and yes, even a kind of business that demands intelligent strategy and professionalism. So, what do we learn from Rockefeller's philosophy? That no matter how much or how little we have, if we truly want to help others, we must do it wisely, purposefully, and sustainably. Instead of just handing someone a fish, think about how to provide a fishing rod, or better yet, how to help build a system where people can fish for themselves. Thank you for listening. Let's take a moment to reflect on these lessons and how we can apply them to our own lives. and I'll see you in the next chapter. In the previous chapters, we've explored John D. Rockefeller's journey in building his oil empire. A story of boldness, calculation, and at times, ruthlessness. We've seen how he created a massive enterprise, controlled most of America's oil industry, and became the richest man of modern times. But one question keeps echoing in my mind whenever I read about giants like him. When you've reached the absolute peak of wealth, when you can buy almost anything, what becomes your next goal? What is the ultimate purpose of that enormous fortune? Today, in Chapter 8, The Legacy He Left. Investing in the future, we're going to shift our focus away from barrels of oil and railroad lines to a completely different side of Rockefeller, the side of a great philanthropist. A man who, after conquering the business world, turned to confront some of humanity's greatest challenges, disease, illiteracy, and poverty. And unlike his business ventures, these efforts weren't designed to profit him personally, but to invest in the future of humanity in ways that very few people of his time could even imagine. Let's start with education. Rockefeller, who came from a modest family and had only a few years of formal schooling, held a deep belief in the transformative power of knowledge. He understood that for a nation or a society to develop sustainably, education was a non-negotiable foundation. So in 1890, one of his largest and most visionary philanthropic investments was born the University of Chicago. At that time, higher education in the United States was still relatively underdeveloped. Rockefeller didn't just write a big check. He laid the foundation for a world-class university with an ambitious vision. He invested in top-tier faculty, modern facilities, and most importantly, an educational philosophy that emphasized critical thinking, research, and innovation. What was the result? Within just a few decades, the University of Chicago became one of the world's leading academic centers, producing Nobel Prize-winning scientists by the dozens, along with influential leaders and thinkers. Even today, it remains one of the most prestigious universities in the world, constantly pushing the frontiers of knowledge in nearly every field. But Rockefeller's vision didn't stop at academic education. He realized that people can't fully develop if their health is under constant threat. At the turn of the 20th century, disease was rampant and medicine was still in its early stages. Tuberculosis, malaria, typhoid fever, they were killing millions. This is where Rockefeller once again showed his extraordinary vision. In 1901, he founded the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research, now Rockefeller University. Imagine how revolutionary it was at that time to create an institution focused primarily on understanding disease rather than just treating it. Rockefeller didn't want to simply build hospitals to manage symptoms. He wanted to dig into the roots of illness, to discover new methods of treatment and prevention. The institute attracted some of the brightest medical minds in the world, giving them the resources and freedom to pursue groundbreaking research. From that work came revolutionary discoveries, understanding the role of viruses in disease-developing vaccines and later antibiotics, and deepening our knowledge of molecular biology. This institute permanently changed how we understand and confront disease, helping to lay the foundation of modern medicine. Now let's talk about one of Rockefeller's most concrete and directly impactful philanthropic campaigns, the effort to eliminate hookworm disease in the American South. This is a story that amazes me every time I revisit it. In the early 20th century, the American South was still mired in poverty and underdevelopment. One of the deep, largely unnoticed causes was hookworm infection. This was a silent disease, not well known at the time, caused by parasites that enter through bare feet, leading to severe anemia, weakness, and slowed physical and mental development. Millions of people, especially children, were infected without knowing it. Their productivity and ability to learn were severely reduced, feeding a vicious cycle of poverty and illness. Through the Rockefeller Foundation, Rockefeller funded a massive multi-year campaign to fight this disease. This wasn't just about handing out medicine. It was a full-scale public health strategy decades ahead of its time. 1. Scientific research. First, researchers had to fully understand how hookworms spread and how to treat it effectively. 2. Community education. Perhaps most importantly, they taught people about hygiene, the importance of wearing shoes, and building proper latrines. They organized public talks, distributed pamphlets, and even used traveling shows and performers to spread the message. 3. Mass treatment. They examined and treated millions of people, providing free medication and making sure everyone had access to care. What was the result? The campaign dramatically reduced hookworm infection rates, improving health productivity and learning capacity for millions of people in the South. It didn't just make people healthier, it contributed significantly to the region's economic and social development. This is a textbook example of how investment in public health can create deep, widespread benefits. From the success of the hookworm campaign, Rockefeller's vision expanded to a global scale. He realized that the challenges of health and education weren't limited by America's borders. Through the Rockefeller Foundation, one of the largest and most influential philanthropic organizations in the world, he invested heavily in public health and education internationally. The foundation financed the construction of medical schools in China, supported the development of yellow fever vaccines in Africa, helped establish schools of public health in multiple countries, and funded agricultural programs to improve food security. What's especially notable is that he didn't just send money. His vision was to build sustainable institutions and systems that could stand on their own. He invested in training local doctors, scientists, and public health experts, giving them the knowledge and tools to solve their own nation's problems. This was an approach rooted in empowerment, not just short-term relief. Think about this. Decades before the United Nations or the World Health Organization existed, Rockefeller was already acting on the idea that health and education were global priorities. He laid the groundwork for what we now call global health and international development. His efforts affected the lives of hundreds of millions of people around the world, many of whom never knew his name. His legacy, not just money, but organizations and systems. What I find most fascinating, and what I think is the most important lesson from Rockefeller's philanthropic legacy, is this. His legacy is not just the enormous sums he gave away. It lies in the organizations and systems he built. Rockefeller didn't just donate big numbers. He applied the same business principles he used to build Standard Oil to his philanthropy. Efficiency, long-term vision, strategic investment, and a focus on sustainable impact. He didn't just offer relief, he invested in the future. The University of Chicago, Rockefeller University, the Rockefeller Foundation. These institutions are still active and powerful today, more than a century after they were founded. They remain beacons of knowledge, innovation, and progress, tackling 21st century challenges like climate change and global pandemics. They are living proof of the vision of a man who understood that the best use of his wealth was not personal consumption, but building durable foundations for human progress. We can argue about how Rockefeller accumulated his fortune, but it's hard to deny that the way he used much of that fortune has left a timeless legacy, one that has touched billions of lives and shaped our world in ways even he probably couldn't have fully foreseen. He showed that money can be a powerful tool for changing the world, not just for generating profit, but for creating a better future for everyone. And that brings us to the end of this chapter. From a man obsessed with control and accumulation, Rockefeller transformed himself into an architect of progress, a long-term investor in humanity's future. In the next chapter, we'll bring together the most important lessons from the extraordinary life of John D. Rockefeller. A life full of contradictions, but also full of inspiration. Don't miss it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. After our journey exploring how Rockefeller built his empire, his bold business strategies, and his extraordinary long-range vision, I believe many of you, just like me now, have a more complete understanding of this tycoon. We've seen a brilliant mind, a will of iron, a man who seemed unshakable. But perhaps the question many of us still carry inside is this: What lies behind the exterior of that powerful man? What about his personal life? How did he think about money, happiness, and the true meaning of life? Today, we're opening another door, a door that leads into the deeper layers of John D. Rockefeller's inner world. Through Chapter 9, Reflections on Life and Family from Random Reminiscences of Men and Events. This is a chapter that I believe will give us the most genuine and surprising look at Rockefeller. Not as an industrial titan, but as a father, a husband, a man who carried profound reflections about life. When we think of the wealthiest people in history, the images that usually come to mind are extravagance, luxury, and sometimes a bit of arrogance. Rockefeller wasn't exempt from those assumptions. Yet he had a famous quote that, at first hearing, may sound shocking, but the more you think about it, the deeper it becomes. He once said, "God gave me my money, and I see no reason to apologize for it." Taken at face value, this might sound like pride or an attempt to justify immense wealth. But based on everything we now know about Rockefeller, his devout Baptist upbringing and deep religious conviction, this was actually an affirmation of his purpose. To him, wealth wasn't just the result of personal labor or sharp business instincts. It was a blessing, a responsibility entrusted to him by God. He saw himself as a steward of that fortune, a tool through which God's will could be carried out. And we can see this clearly in his later philanthropic work, the enormous contributions to education, public health, and scientific research. He didn't apologize for wealth because he believed he had used it as it was meant to be used, not to hoard for himself, but to uplift others. This perspective made me stop and think. In our world today, money is often tied to competition, anxiety, and material obsession. But what if we viewed money differently, as a tool, a resource to create good, rather than an ultimate goal or a source of guilt? I think Rockefeller found peace in that idea, and it's something many of us are still searching for. But what truly surprised and impressed me about Rockefeller wasn't just how he thought about money, it was how he lived with it and how he raised his children. Considering his enormous fortune, one might imagine a life of limitless luxury. Instead, the opposite was true. John D. Rockefeller was known for his astonishing simplicity. He dressed neatly but modestly, his daily meals were incredibly simple, and he watched every penny. Not out of stinginess, but because he had internalized the values of hard work and frugality from childhood. And more importantly, he wanted to instill those values in the next generation. His approach to teaching his children about money is one of the most fascinating parts of his story. While other wealthy children enjoyed privileged, effortless lifestyles, Rockefeller's children had to earn their spending money. He came up with a unique system. Each child kept a small ledger book to record every household chore they completed, making their bed, pulling weeds, sharpening pencils, helping neighbors. Each task had a fixed price. For example, pulling a bucket of weeds might earn a penny. Sharpening a dozen pencils might earn 5 cents. It sounds almost humorous today, doesn't it? But through these small tasks, Rockefeller's children learned that money doesn't appear out of thin air. It comes from effort and time. They also learned how to manage their money, because there were fines for being late, failing a task, or breaking something. This was a priceless lesson in the value of work independence and responsibility. As a young person living in today's world, where many parents try to provide everything for their children, I can't help but reflect on how easily we unintentionally remove opportunities for kids to experience effort and develop respect for money. Rockefeller's example made me think a lot about modern parenting. Are we raising a generation that appreciates the value of hard work? He didn't want wealth to spoil his children. He wanted them to build character, even though they were born into unimaginable privilege. Money, status, power. These things can give us a lot. But there's one thing money can't buy: health and peace of mind. Rockefeller learned this lesson the hard way. At age 53, After years of relentless work and constant pressure, he suffered a severe health collapse. The stress broke him down. He lost his hair, his weight dropped dramatically, and he was on the brink of emotional and physical exhaustion. That was the turning point. He realized he needed to change. He began to take time for himself and appreciate things he once dismissed as wasting time. He found joy in the simplest things: walking in the garden, playing golf, spending time with family. He became a passionate golfer, an attentive gardener, and a genuine lover of nature. He spent hours tending to his plants, watching them grow and enjoying fresh air. Reconnecting with nature and with physical activity helped him heal in a remarkable way. He lived another 44 years after that crisis, reaching the age of 97, astonishing for a man who had once stood at the edge of collapse. This shows us the importance of balance. Money and success matter, but they should never cost us our physical or mental well-being. Rockefeller's wisdom, shaped more than a century ago, still holds immense value today. In our world, we're often swept up in non-stop deadlines, responsibilities, and pressure to the point we neglect ourselves and forget to cherish the people and things we truly love. His story reminds us: pause, breathe, find balance before it's too late. Don't let your life become one endless race. So what advice did a man who lived nearly a century, built an extraordinary empire, and experienced life's peaks and valleys leave for the younger generation? Rockefeller offered many invaluable lessons, ones that, if we truly listen and apply, could bring unexpected positive change. First and foremost, he emphasized hard work and integrity. Never give up, he often said. Success doesn't come to the lazy or to those looking for shortcuts. It requires persistence, discipline, and a strong work ethic. Second, he encouraged saving and smart investing. He wasn't a fan of extravagance. Every dollar earned had to be respected, saved wisely, and invested in something meaningful, whether materially or spiritually. Learning financial discipline early, he believed, is the foundation of lifelong freedom. Third, and perhaps most moving, was his belief in kindness and generosity. He believed that sharing one's wealth with those less fortunate wasn't just a social duty. It was a genuine source of joy. "Nothing brings me more happiness," he once said, "than to see the young trees I've planted grow into strong, full-grown ones," a metaphor for his philanthropic projects. When you give, you don't just help others, you enrich your own soul. Finally, he reminded us of the importance of health and balance. Don't let your work consume you to the point that you forget the value of life, family, and peaceful moments in nature. Take care of yourself, body and mind. Chapter 9, Reflections on Life and Family, is truly a different portrait, a deeper, more intimate look at John D. Rockefeller. From a cold, calculating business titan in the minds of many, he emerges as a man of depth, faith, inner conflict, and meaningful life lessons. I hope that through this chapter, you not only discover Rockefeller's personal side, but also find your own reflections about wealth, happiness, family, and faith. Money may be powerful, but values, kindness, and balance are the true compass of a fulfilling life. So what about you? What part of this chapter struck you the most? Do you agree with Rockefeller's views on money or the way he raised his children? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I know that exploring the life of John D. Rockefeller isn't always easy. At times, it's uncomfortable, sometimes controversial. But that's exactly what makes it so fascinating, isn't it? We've turned page after page of random reminiscences of men and events together, smiling at his everyday stories, marveling at his bold decisions, and occasionally falling into deep silence when we reach those lesser-known, more complicated parts of one of the most influential figures in history. And now, having walked with him through almost an entire lifetime, it's time for us to step back and look at the whole picture. This final chapter, Conclusion and a Legacy Beyond Time, is not just an ending. It's a doorway into deeper reflection. We're going to recap Rockefeller's turbulent life and career, look at his complex legacy with a balanced perspective, And most importantly, pull out the core lessons we can still apply to our own lives, even here in the 21st century. 1. Looking back at Rockefeller, ruthless capitalist or great reformer. When we talk about John D. Rockefeller, two images immediately come to mind, opposites like fire and water. On one side, he's the ruthless oil baron, a monopolist who would stop at nothing to achieve his goals, crushing competitors accused of fueling massive inequality and injustice. On the other side, he's a visionary reformer, a genius organizer who built an entire industry from scratch, brought order and stability to a chaotic young oil market, and later became one of the most generous and forward-thinking philanthropists in history. So what's the truth? Was he both? Or have we been seeing him through a lens that's far too simplistic? In earlier chapters, we saw that Rockefeller was no angel. He was a hard-nosed businessman, a cool strategist, and in the brutal competition of America's Gilded Age, when laws were loose and business ethics were still evolving, he did things that today would be flat-out illegal or considered deeply unethical. Secret deals with railroads for special shipping rates, buying out competitors at prices they couldn't refuse, pushing others to sell under pressure. All of these helped build the monopolist image that has followed him for more than a century. But we also can't deny his extraordinary vision, his organizational genius, and his unshakable will. He saw the potential in oil when the industry was still chaotic and fragmented. He spent his life turning that mess into an organized, efficient system that powered a rapidly industrializing world. He didn't just sell crude oil. He invested in refining transportation byproducts, creating a vertically integrated giant that cut costs, stabilized supply, and delivered products more efficiently than anyone else. That was a business revolution very few could have pulled off. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. Rockefeller was a product of his time, a complex human being full of contradictions whose choices can be debated, but whose results are impossible to ignore. He didn't just build an empire, he helped shape an era. And our job is to look at him from multiple angles, not just through a single moral label. 2. Testing his principles against modern business. Even though more than 100 years have passed, many of Rockefeller's core principles still hold up. And in a lot of ways, they've become standard playbooks for modern business. Let's revisit a few of them and see what we can learn. Extreme efficiency and relentless cost control. Rockefeller was famous for hunting down waste in every corner of his operations. He believed that every dollar saved was a dollar earned. Modern application. Today we talk about lean startups, automation, and optimizing processes. Big companies streamline their supply chains. SaaS and cloud-based businesses constantly optimize server usage and operations. Retailers refine inventory management down to the day. That mindset, maximizing efficiency and minimizing waste, is pure Rockefeller. Long-term vision and adaptability. He wasn't obsessed with only short-term profit. He tried to anticipate where the industry was headed. When kerosene lamps began to give way to electricity, Standard Oil pivoted toward gasoline for automobiles. Modern application. Think of companies like Apple, Amazon, Tesla. They're not just selling current products. They're betting heavily on the next wave: AI, clean energy, new devices, new infrastructure. Startups that pivot when their first idea doesn't work are basically living out the same principle. In a world that changes daily, those who refuse to adapt are left behind. Focus and specialization. Even though his empire was huge, Rockefeller stayed focused on oil and tightly related activities. Modern application. Today's strongest companies usually have a clear core competency. They might diversify, but they never lose sight of what they're best at. Horizontal diversification is useful, but only when it aligns with a clear mission and doesn't dilute focus. Hiring and keeping the top talent. Rockefeller surrounded himself with the best people he could find, and then trusted them with real authority. Modern application. Modern companies pay enormous salaries, offer stock options, and build strong cultures to attract and retain great talent. "People are our greatest asset" isn't just a slogan, it's a survival strategy. Constant reinvestment. Standard Oil reinvested a huge portion of its profits back into expansion technology and infrastructure. Modern application. Any company that wants sustainable growth today, whether it's a tech startup or a global corporation, has to do the same. Profits only matter if they're used to build something stronger for tomorrow. But there is a key difference we must recognize: ethics and social responsibility. In Rockefeller's time, these ideas were vague. Today, they're front and center. Modern companies are held to strict standards on fair competition, labor rights, environmental protection, and corporate responsibility. Many of Rockefeller's tactics, especially monopolizing markets, would be shut down quickly in today's regulatory environment. That contrast shows how much our collective expectations of business behavior have evolved. 3. A dual legacy shaping the oil industry and shaping modern philanthropy. Rockefeller's legacy can be seen as dual, with two massive areas of impact that still ripple through our world. Shaping the global oil industry. Before Rockefeller, the oil business was a wild mess. Hundreds of small operators, chaotic pricing, enormous waste, and constant instability. Under his leadership, Standard Oil created a fully integrated model from drilling and pipelines to refineries, tank cars, and retail distribution. That meant lower costs, more consistent product quality, and a much more reliable supply of oil-based products. He helped define how large energy companies would be structured for generation-scale integration and efficiency. Even though Standard Oil was broken up, its DNA lives on in major oil companies and energy conglomerates to this day, shaping modern strategic philanthropy. This is the less flashy, but arguably more transformative part of his legacy. At first, Rockefeller gave in traditional ways, supporting churches, helping the poor. But over time, with the mind of a systems thinker, he revolutionized philanthropy. He didn't just want to give money. He wanted that money to be used as effectively as possible with the greatest long-term impact. He founded the Rockefeller Foundation with a clear mission to promote the well-being of humanity around the world. This wasn't just a benevolent charity. It was almost like an R&D lab for society. The foundation funded groundbreaking work in public health, hookworm eradication, yellow fever, research education, the University of Chicago, and many others, and science, especially in biomedical research and public health systems. He helped turn philanthropy into something systematic, data-driven, and strategic. What we now call philanthropy, as practiced by organizations like the Ford Foundation, the Gates Foundation, and many others, stands directly on the foundation Rockefeller helped build. He showed that the same mindset used to build a business empire could be used to tackle some of humanity's biggest problems. 4. A question for you. What's the biggest lesson you take from his life? After everything we've walked through together, from his tough childhood and ironclad work ethic, to his sharp business strategies, his controversial monopoly power, and his sweeping philanthropic legacy, I want to turn the question over to you. If you had to choose just one big lesson from John D. Rockefeller's life, what would it be? Is it the importance of efficiency and frugality in every area of life and work? Is it the power of long-term vision and the willingness to adapt when the world changes? Is it the strength of willpower and discipline, turning bold ideas into reality? Is it the lesson about the power of scale and organization, even when it comes with controversy? Or is it the deeper meaning of giving back strategically and effectively, using money, not just to accumulate, but to advance human progress? Whatever you choose. I believe Rockefeller's life is a treasure chest of stories, principles, and reminders that human beings are capable of extraordinary things if they have the vision, the perseverance, and the resilience to pursue them. Our journey through random reminiscences of men and events ends here. I hope these chapters, the reflections, and my own commentary have brought you value, knowledge, inspiration, and maybe a few moments of uncomfortable but necessary introspection. John D. Rockefeller is not an easy figure to judge. And that's exactly what makes his story timeless. He reminds us that great success almost always comes with great challenges. And that true legacy isn't just the wealth we accumulate, but what we build and leave behind for future generations, in institutions, in ideas, and in the lives we help change. Thank you so much for listening and for taking this journey with me. Now it's your turn. What is the single biggest lesson you're taking from Rockefeller's life? Drop your answer in the comments. I'd really love to hear your perspective. And if you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit like, share it with someone who loves history and business, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next. Now, we're going to dive into a topic that might sound a little distant at first, but is actually incredibly close to our everyday lives. We're going to explore the powerful practical lessons from John D. Rockefeller's book, Random Reminiscences of Men and Events, a name that might instantly make you think of skyscrapers, industrial empires, and mountains of money. Sounds a bit overwhelming, right? You might be thinking, what does a guy like me have to do with a Gilded Age oil billionaire? Totally the wrong question. Yes, Rockefeller was a giant in the world of finance. But the principles he used to reach that level around money management, personal efficiency, and even giving are universal. They can be applied by anyone at any stage of life. This is not some magic formula to become a billionaire in a week. These are the building blocks for creating a more solid, more effective, and more meaningful financial life. And to turn those big principles into concrete, doable actions, I've wrapped them into a special 7-day action plan just for you. Think of it as a small challenge, a step-by-step roadmap for us to practice together and actually feel the change. Get ready because we're starting right now. 7-day action plan. Applying Rockefeller's philosophy day 1 and 2. Track your spending. Create your own ledger, eh? I know this sounds dry and boring. But this is the foundation. This is the first cornerstone you need to lay. John D. Rockefeller, often called the richest man in modern history, never let a single penny slip out of his sight. He had what he called his own Ledger A, a book where he recorded every dollar that came in and went out down to the smallest expense. And I want you to do the same. Ask yourself, do you really know where your money goes every day? Or are you like most of us, just vaguely feeling like the money's gone without knowing what black hole it disappeared into? Without clarity, you're basically trying to steer a ship with no map, no idea where you are, and no idea where you're headed. Your challenge for these first 2 days is this: start recording every single expense. Every single went one. From your morning coffee, your office lunch gas, to small impulse buys and random snacks. How to do it? You don't need a fancy accounting book, a small notebook, a budgeting app on your phone. There are tons of great free ones. Or a simple Google Sheet, Excel file on your computer. Any of those will work. The key is consistency and building the habit. Goal: by the end of day 2, you should have a clear picture of your cash flow. You'll probably be surprised at how many tiny expenses are quietly eating up a big chunk of your budget. This is not an exercise in guilt. It's a tool for awareness, like turning on the lights in a dark room and finally seeing what's actually there. Day 3 and 4. Eliminate waste. Find one source of waste and cut it. Rockefeller absolutely hated waste. His philosophy wasn't just about making money, it was about optimizing every resource. He understood that waste doesn't only mean money, it's also time, energy, and even emotional bandwidth. And once those are gone, it's very hard to get them back. In today's hectic world, we often fall into all kinds of waste without even noticing. Maybe it's hours of mindless scrolling on social media. Maybe it's subscriptions you never use. Maybe it's emotional energy spent worrying about things you can't control. Your challenge for these 2 days is this: identify one single source of waste in your life, money, time, or energy, and deliberately cut it. Examples of financial waste: a streaming service or app you're paying for, but barely use, cancel it. Constantly buying random snacks or drinks you don't really need. Dial it back. Examples of time waste. Spending way too long scrolling Facebook, TikTok, Instagram with no purpose. Set a timer or a screen limit and stick to it. Procrastinating on an important task. Commit to working on it for just 5 focused minutes. Examples of energy waste. Constantly complaining about things you can't change. Try shifting that energy towards solving problems or consciously letting them go. Goal: by identifying and eliminating just one small source of waste. You're not only saving a resource, you're training your mind to be intentional. Imagine removing one little pebble from your path every day. Sooner or later, that path becomes much clearer. This is your first step toward creating more space for what truly matters. Day 5. Invest in yourself. Spend 1 hour learning a new skill. You might think a super rich guy like Rockefeller only cared about making more money. But in reality, he was always learning, always improving himself. He understood that knowledge and skill are the most valuable assets you can own, and no one can ever take them from you. They compound over time and pay off in ways money alone never could. We often think of investing as stocks, crypto, real estate, and so on. But the highest return investment you will ever make is in yourself. It's not selfish. It's essential if you want to go further, contribute more, and live a fuller life. Your challenge for this day is spend 1 hour learning a new skill or deepening your knowledge in a meaningful area. How to do it? Pick a skill or topic that you're genuinely interested in, or, will help your career, your business, or your passion. For example, take a free online course on Coursera, YouTube, Udemy, etc. Read a solid chapter from a book in your field. Study a long-form blog post or article on a topic you care about. Practice a new language using an app. Learn a new feature in a tool you use every day. Excel, Notion, Figma, etc. Work on soft skills like public speaking, writing, or critical thinking. Goal: you don't need to become an expert in 1 hour. The goal is to reignite your learning mindset, break through inertia, and remind yourself that you are always capable of growth. 1 hour a day doesn't sound like much, but over a year, that's 365 hours. That's weeks of full-time learning. Treat this like a serious appointment with yourself, an appointment you're not allowed to cancel. Day 6 and 7. Plan to give back. Do one intentional act of kindness. This is the part many people skip over when they talk about billionaires. We see the wealth, but forget that many of them, including Rockefeller, became legendary philanthropists. Rockefeller believed that every privilege comes with responsibility, and that giving was a non-negotiable part of a meaningful life. Giving isn't just about money. In everyday life, we have countless opportunities to give other things that are just as valuable. Our time, our knowledge, our skills, our attention, our kindness, even just our presence. Giving doesn't just help others, it enriches you. It creates a sense of peace, joy, and connection that money alone cannot buy. Your challenge for these last 2 days is plan and carry out one intentional act of kindness. How to do it, ideas. Give your time. Spend 1 to 2 hours helping a friend or family member with something they're stuck on. Volunteer at a local shelter community group or charity. Give your knowledge, skills. Tutor someone in a subject you're good at. Help a younger person with career or study advice. Teach someone how to use a tool or solve a problem, Give kindness. Write a sincere thank you message to someone who's helped you. Buy a meal or coffee for someone in need. Hold the door, give up your seat, or let someone merge in traffic consciously. Pick up trash in a public area. Offer a genuine smile and a few encouraging words to someone who looks like they're having a rough day. Give money if you can. Donate a small amount to a charity you believe in. Support a community project or a verified online fundraiser. Quietly help someone around you who is struggling. Goal: the key is to do this intentionally, not out of obligation, but from a desire to spread something positive. After you've done it, take a moment to reflect. Notice how you feel. You'll realize that giving doesn't make you poorer. It makes you richer in emotion, meaning, and your sense of connection to others. And that's our 7-day action plan inspired by the timeless principles of John D. Rockefeller. This is not a miracle hack to become a billionaire in a week. It is a simple, powerful roadmap to start building stronger financial habits, boost your personal effectiveness, and find deeper meaning through generosity. Remember, big changes always start with small steps. The point isn't perfection, it's consistency and daily progress. Challenge yourself for the next 7 days. Start today. Don't postpone it. And when you're done, I'd love to hear about your experience. What did you learn? How did you feel? Share your story in the comments below. Oh, every story you share is a huge source of motivation for our community. Now, to wrap up everything we've explored, the key ideas and deepest reflections we've uncovered together, I want to condense this entire video into just 3 core points. These 3 lessons, in my opinion, are not only the backbone of Rockefeller's entire philosophy, but also simple, memorable guiding principles that you can actually start using right away in your own life. Whether you're someone chasing a big dream, grinding to build your career, or simply trying to manage your personal life more effectively, I truly believe these 3 points will give you some powerful perspectives. Let's dive in. 1. The power of being meticulous. Doing ordinary things in an extraordinary way. The first lesson, and probably the most foundational one I've taken from all of this, is the power of being meticulous. It sounds simple, maybe even a little boring. But in reality, this is the key factor that separates average success from truly extraordinary success. Rockefeller wasn't some wild genius coming up with crazy, never-before-seen inventions. He was a man who did ordinary things, but he did them so precisely, so carefully, and so consistently well that no one else could match him. Think about this: massive success doesn't always come from doing something unbelievable that no one has ever imagined. More often, it comes from doing the basic things that everybody already knows about, but doing them with a level of detail, care, and dedication that almost nobody is willing to commit to. In the book, we see Rockefeller obsess over the smallest details. From squeezing more efficiency out of each oil barrel, saving every last drop from being wasted, to tracking every single transaction in his ledgers, he understood that the devil is in the details, and that hidden inside those details are the opportunities for profit and long-term advantage. Especially when it comes to managing money personally and in business, this lesson hits hard. It reminds us not to ignore the small stuff, the tiny fees, the minor expenses, the little leaks in our financial bucket. It's like carefully tracking every small expense you make, every coffee, every impulse buy, so you actually see where your money is going. Or in business, optimizing every tiny step of a process, every stage of a workflow to reduce waste and increase efficiency. Each small saving, each carefully considered decision, each detail you refine when added up over time, turns into serious wealth and an edge that competitors simply can't catch. Rockefeller teaches us that greatness is rarely one giant leap. It's the sum of thousands of small steps done consciously and meticulously. So look at what you're doing every day: your work, your studies, your finances. Are you doing things in a good enough way? Or are you trying to do them as perfectly as you can, down to the details? That's the real question. 2. Systems thinking, seeing the whole picture. Next, the second lesson I want you to really remember is systems thinking. If being meticulous helps you optimize each part, then systems thinking is the ability to see the whole machine, how all the parts connect, interact, and create overall results. Rockefeller didn't just build an oil refinery. He built an entire system that controlled the full value chain, from drilling for crude, transporting it, refining it, all the way to distributing the final product to market. He didn't just ask, how do we improve this one step? He constantly asked, how do we make all these parts work together in the smoothest, most efficient way possible? Think of your job, or even your personal life, like a huge machine full of gears. Rockefeller didn't just care if one gear spun smoothly. He cared about how each gear affected the others and how the entire system produced power. When one gear jammed, he didn't just fix that one piece. He looked for why it jammed and whether something earlier in the chain was misaligned. In your work systems, thinking keeps you from getting lost in tiny details and forgetting the bigger goal. When something goes wrong, like sales dropping, a project stalling, or team morale falling, someone with systems thinking doesn't just slap on a quick fix. They step back and ask, how are marketing, product, customer service, and operations interacting? Is this a symptom or a root problem? What's actually driving this outcome? In your personal life, systems thinking helps you balance your health, finances, relationships, career, and personal growth. Instead of obsessing over one area and neglecting the rest, you start to see how they all affect each other. Good health helps you work better. Solid finances give you peace of mind to build relationships and take risks. Strong relationships support your mental health and resilience. Seeing life as an interconnected system helps you make smarter, longer-lasting decisions. This ability to see the whole, understand connections, and think in terms of causes and effects, that's what allows you to make decisions that are not just good for now, but sustainable in the long run. That's the mindset of a true architect, someone who can see the entire building even when only the first brick has been laid. 3. Strategic giving, treating generosity like a serious investment. And finally, and honestly for me, one of the most powerful lessons of all strategic giving. This idea can completely change how we think about generosity, shifting it from something spontaneous and emotional into a deliberate, purposeful investment. For many people, helping others is a kind of spur-of-the-moment thing, an act of kindness, which is beautiful in itself. But Rockefeller, who adjusted for inflation, is often considered one of the greatest philanthropists in history. Approached giving with the same seriousness, discipline, and long-term vision that he applied to running Standard Oil. He didn't just hand out money. He treated helping others like a major investment project. He studied problems deeply, looked at causes, not just symptoms, and searched for solutions that could create the biggest and most lasting impact. He wanted his money to tackle the roots of society's problems, not just put a bandage on the surface. He funded research in medicine, education, and agriculture, looking for leverage points where a dollar invested could improve the lives of millions, not just a few. What does that mean for us? It means that whenever we want to help support a cause or give back, we don't have to do it blindly. We can ask, how can my help create the biggest and longest lasting impact? Research before donating to a charity. Take a moment to understand their mission, how they operate, and what kind of results they've produced. Long-term thinking. Instead of only responding to emergencies, think about contributing to education, skill development, or infrastructure that helps people stand on their own in the long run. Strategic use of all your resources. It's not just about money. Think about how you can use your time, your skills, your network, your experience to multiply the impact. Rockefeller showed that kindness doesn't need to be naive. When guided by wisdom, strategy, and intention, giving can become one of the most powerful tools for actually changing the world. It's not just charity. It's investing in humanity and hoping the return will be a more just, healthy, and prosperous society for everyone. These 3 points, the power of being meticulous, systems thinking, and strategic giving, are, in my view, the 3 solid pillars that held up the Rockefeller empire. And they're still just as sharp, just as relevant, and just as powerful for us in the 21st century. I hope that whether you watched the whole video or are just catching this summary, you found at least one or maybe all 3 of these ideas useful and inspiring. Reflect on them. Try applying them to your work, your money, your relationships, your choices. Sometimes the greatest lessons in life are hidden inside the simplest principles, just waiting for us to notice them and actually put them into practice. If you found this video valuable, don't hesitate to hit the like button, share it with your friends and family, and of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next. I've got a lot more I'd love to share with you, so we've finally reached the last pages of Random Reminiscences of Men and Events, a book that, in my opinion, isn't just the recollections of a legend, but a hidden roadmap filled with timeless principles. We've seen a John D. Rockefeller who wasn't just a monument of wealth, but a razor-sharp thinker, a man of unshakable resolve, and someone with a rare, long-range vision. He lived, he built, and he left behind a legacy not only measured in dollars, but in the philosophies he carried, how he lived, worked, led, and gave. And now, as the door to Rockefeller's world closes for the moment, I want to open another door, a space for us, for this community of curious minds and builders. Because knowledge only becomes truly valuable when it's shared, discussed, and applied to our own lives. First, I genuinely want to hear from you. Throughout this video, you've probably picked up on one or two principles that Rockefeller lived by, whether it was his disciplined approach to money, the way he built strong teams, his relentless perseverance through adversity, or even his calm, almost serene attitude toward both success and failure. I'm certain something in his journey struck a chord with you, something that made you pause, reflect, or question. So share it in the comments below. Which Rockefeller principle resonated with you the most? And more importantly, how will you apply it to your life, your career, or a personal project starting tomorrow? Don't hesitate to be specific. I'll be reading every single comment, and I truly believe that through those honest reflections, we can build an incredible library of wisdom, an endless source of inspiration shaped by our own community. Take a look at what others share as well. You might discover a fresh insight on the principle you chose. And if this journey through classic books and big ideas like the ones Rockefeller lived by has sparked something inside you, a fire to understand the world more deeply, then don't let that flame go out. This is only the beginning. Our channel will continue to be a place where you'll find deep dive analyses, unique personal perspectives, and breakdowns of the books that changed the world, works whose value hasn't faded with time. Together, we'll unlock the secrets of some of the greatest minds who ever lived, from business titans and philosophers to visionary thinkers. To make sure you don't miss any of the upcoming videos, whether it's a book on strategy, human psychology, leadership, or something completely unexpected, hit the subscribe button right now. And don't forget something extremely important. Turn on the notification bell so you get alerts the moment a new video drops. That way you'll be one of the first to join us every time we explore a new idea. If this video gave you a new perspective, sparked an interesting thought, or even just gave you one of those, so that's how it works moments, then give it a like. It's not just encouragement for our team letting us know these efforts matter to you, but it also helps YouTube's algorithm spread these insights to more people. People who may be searching for clarity, growth, or inspiration. Your single like can be the spark someone else out there needs. And finally, think for a moment. Is there someone in your contacts, in your circle of friends or co-workers, who could use a strong dose of inspiration? Someone building a career, shaping a vision, or trying to create a legacy of their own? Rockefeller proved that with the right principles and a determined spirit, nearly anything is possible. Maybe someone you know is stuck, overwhelmed, or simply waiting for that one spark to begin a new journey. Share this video with them. Who knows, one small lesson from Rockefeller passed through this video might ignite something big. A new career, a new mindset, or even a life-changing decision. Good knowledge is meant to be shared, isn't it? Thank you for joining me on this meaningful journey. Our community is growing every single day, and it's because of you, your presence, your engagement, your trust. Remember, knowledge is endless, and the journey of learning never stops. I can't wait to see you in the next episodes with another classic book and more stories and lessons that go even deeper. Farewell for now, and may you stay strong and steady on the path of building your own legacy. See you soon.